episode 133, and we have a very special guest on. His name is Briscoe. He's a co-founder of the multifamily investing firm Four Oaks Capital that you can find on the website called exactly the same, fouroakscapital.com. He's also the host of the exciting new Diary of the Investment Investor podcast that you, of course, can find on iTunes. He's an active duty Marine Lieutenant Colonel currently stationed at the Pentagon. So, Brian, just want to say a big thank you for being today on this episode. I appreciate it.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Thanks for having me.
It's no problem. It's my pleasure. So, okay, so let's take everything apart and discuss the beginnings, the journey, the stages. How did you get involved with the real estate? Can you talk about your personal journey a little bit?
Yeah. I think it's very cliche, and I'm just going to say it. Rich Dad Poor Dad was kind of one of the big beginnings. I grew up in my dad followed the one job path, pension path. So he's retired, living on a pension right now. And I remember him telling me all the time that, hey, I've never figured out this money thing. I've never figured out how to make money, how to be rich. And he kept on telling me that if that's something that I wanted, I needed to learn from somebody else. So anyway, mid-20s, I picked up the book Rich Dad Poor Dad. And I was thinking, okay, this everyone's raving about this book. I might as well pick it up, see what's in it. And it literally changed my mindset. And I think that happened to a lot of people.
Mm-hmm.
So I started looking at, okay, how can I purchase assets that are going to appreciate, or assets that are going to cash flow? And quite frankly, my mindset, I was still thinking small. I didn't really have the ability, didn't have what it took at the time to think bigger. So I looked at what I could do, and I'm like, well, I can open up a retirement fund, start contributing to that, very, very vanilla. But I also thought, hey, I'm in the military. I move every 2 to 3 years like clockwork. I might as well just start buying houses every time that I move, and that turned into, I want to try to buy a house every year. And so picked up a handful of single family houses, and then did back-to-back deployments, overseas tour, which basically threw a wrench into that. So anyway, a couple of years ago, I sort of fell off the horse for a little bit. We had a handful of properties that were cash flowing, but I went for, I think, 4 years without purchasing anything new, and had another long deployment where I just had a lot of spare time, a lot of time to think. So basically reformulated my plan and decided that I needed to kick the real estate investment into higher gear to be able to reach the financial goals that I wanted to hit. So that said, I started pulling out spreadsheets and looking over, okay, if I go back to this one house per year thing that I was trying to do, how is that going to work? And the answer was, it wasn't going to work fast enough. And then I started reading about other ways to purchase properties. I read everything under the sun that I could get my hands on. I read about the subject to, lease options, all kinds of different ways to be able to, purchase properties fast with no money down. And finally, I stumbled across a book that Brandon Turner from Bigger Pockets wrote, how to buy a 24-unit apartment complex with little or no money down, or something like that. But and that really opened my eyes to apartments. And what I loved about the apartment concept at the time was the ability to scale. It was literally, if you buy a 24-plex, it's buy one get 23 free, is kind of how I looked at it. You're still obviously paying for it, but it's one transaction instead of 24 transactions. And there's lots of economies of scale once you get bigger. So started focusing my education on multifamily, and that started with podcasts. Just was listening to podcasts all the time, and then I started reading, obviously kept on reading books about it, and eventually, paid for a coaching program to, progress my education a little bit further. And that led to, purchasing our first property and forming Four Oaks Capital. And, where we are today is We'll be closing on our 5th property a week from today. That'll bring us up to 250 doors, and we've got another 167 under contract that we're also working on right now.
Mm-hmm. Here you go. So beautiful
Yeah.
journey, and the journey still continues till this
Yeah.
day, and you're just going at it. So the one thing that I would like to kind of cover at the same time, going back to that you're still an active duty, Marine, like
Mhm.
you're still in the military. So even though
Yep.
I'm not from States, but thank you for your service.
Thanks.
And like one thing that I wanted to talk about, as you mentioned, when you read the Rich Dad Poor Dad book, you kind of felt that you didn't look at the real estate first. You looked at the different options, and you said there was some kind of, you need to get your mind like in the right place, right? So can you
Yeah.
talk about serving still in military? Did that add any value to what you're currently doing in a multifamily business? And
Mhm.
did that add it to kind of this the overall success? Basically, that's what I'm asking.
You know, there's ways where it added and there's ways where it detracted, So um, the ways it detracted are obvious. I have spent, more than almost 2 years deployed to the Middle East in the last 10, last 11, so that kind of threw a wrench into things. So just being gone a lot, and besides that, I've had 2 overseas tours, and it's extremely difficult to run a real estate portfolio from halfway across the world. So just the time factor, the lack of time that I've had because of the military has made things more difficult. Um, and then from the other lens, what I do in the military, there's a lot of leadership lessons there. There's a lot of management of personnel, management of funds, and that does correlate strongly to running an apartment investing business. So a lot of things there. Just being able to manage time, manage projects. Obviously, before every deployment, there's a certain amount of things you have to do to get ready for the deployment. And it's just like closing on an apartment building. There's a certain amount of things you have to do. You have to be able to line everything up. You have to be able to sequence things, put them in the right order, and be able to get to close. And preparing for deployment is exactly the same. There is a laundry list of things. Some things are sequential, some things aren't, that you have to get done before you can deploy. And I think the leadership lessons, the management lessons that I've learned in the Marine Corps have directly translated to being better at my job at Four Oaks Capital.
Got it. So one thing that I want to do is give a shout out to the Todd, Eric, Brian, and Kelsey. And you know what I'm talking about is your partners.
Yep.
It's a shame that not 5 of you. Maybe next time I can get 5 of you on a podcast, which I think it will be kind of a very interesting conversation to have all of you on.
Yep.
And probably hard to make it happen. But can you tell, how did you come across these people? I mean, how did you meet your partners?
I was involved in a lot of forums, so I knew from the beginning, well, not really from the beginning. Early on in my quest for acquiring multifamily assets, I realized that I would need to have a team, so I started looking for a team. And there's really 3 things that I realized that I needed. I needed to have a team. I needed to have access to people with money, and I needed to have deals. I had to have a deal flow coming in. So I was doing a whole lot of networking in several different groups to be able to find this team. So came across Eric Shirley first. Eric and Brian Mallon had a pre-existing relationship. They're already partnered. They had their own company, and I met Eric, and he was. I met him because the forum we were on. You click on somebody's picture, and it shows their contact information. And I noticed he had an 803 area code phone number, and that's Columbia, South Carolina. That's where all my wife's family is at. So, if I get a 803 phone call on my phone, I know it's somebody from my wife's family if I don't have them in my contacts. But so I saw his phone number and I reached out to him like, hey, I see you're from South Carolina. My wife is born and raised. And that's really what started the relationship, was just me trying to connect with him based off of that one simple commonality. We started talking off and on. It wasn't very frequent, but every couple of weeks we would exchange a text or a message or a quick phone call. And over the course of several months, we realized that we were chasing the same deals. and one in particular, we found out that we were both about ready to make an offer on the same apartment complex in Columbia, South Carolina. And so led to another phone call. And at the end of the phone call, we agreed that we would collaborate on that one deal instead of compete, and that ended up turning into future collaborations, attempting to get something that we could both work on together. And finally, we got something under contract. We got something under contract. At the time, it was me, Eric, and Brian Mallon. And then we sat down and said, okay, there's three of us. What are we good at? What are we comfortable at doing? And what else do we need? And we realized that there was still a gap. Even with three of us, there's still a gap to what we could do. And so Eric said, hey, I know a guy who might be able to partner with us on this deal. And he introduced me to Todd Butler. And that was literally the beginning of Four Oaks Capital, because we all came together for one deal. We decided that we would, syndicate this property. We would be the core of the general partnership. And after several months, we liked each other. We were all moving in the same direction. We had similar goals, similar everything, so similar timelines and everything. So we ended up creating a company, Four Oaks Capital, and so far so good.
Beautiful. So, I mean, it's part of the blessing, having people just like that on. I mean, first of all, able to find, those type of people that kind of have the similar vision and interest, and, kind of similar goals and approaches. Of course, you kind of have a different strengths, and that's how you benefit each other as a partner, but it's awesome, so that's beautiful. So talking about the deals itself, South Carolina, again, besides being, your wife is being from there, and like one of the partners, maybe a few live there as well. So for what reasons have you chose, South Carolina for investment decision?
So when I moved to DC, it was just over 2 years ago. Prior to DC, I was in San Diego. And when I was living in San Diego, everybody says invest in your backyard, and being active duty military, I knew that in the summer of 2018, I'd move. And the way the Marine Corps does it, we usually don't find out where we're going until about 3 months prior. So I did a lot of reading, a lot of listening to podcasts in San Diego. And I just figured when I find out where I'm going next, I'll start looking for apartments in my backyard. And lo and behold, I get transferred to DC, which is like San Diego. It's just got a very high barrier to entry. So I decided to start looking along the East Coast, and I picked, some of the larger cities, so I picked about 20 to 25 cities, and I just went down and did a lot of research on each one of these cities. What has population growth been like the last 10 years? What is it projected to be in the next 5 to 10? Same thing with economic growth, median income, the supply and demand imbalance, rent growth, things like that. So I did a lot of research on several cities, and it just turned out that the cities in the Southeast were all numerically, head and shoulders above, the Northeast. And originally I was thinking, hey, Baltimore's a good city. I've got Northern Virginia. But when I put all the numbers on the paper and started looking at it, Carolinas and Georgia and Florida were by far the better metros to invest in. And so, looking at that, I started thinking, well, we already know people in the Carolinas. We already go there 3 to 4 times a year anyway to visit my wife's family. So that made Carolinas an easy, and incidentally, I was stationed in North Carolina for 3 years. So we know several of the markets in North Carolina too. So, the first thing we looked at were the numbers. Are these markets good markets? And then when we decided, yeah, they are good markets, we leaned towards the ones that we were already familiar with, and where we already had, somewhat of a network built up.
Okay, got it. So you mentioned that you have 2 deals right now in South Carolina. So how big are these that you mentioned?
So one of them will close next week, is 82 units. And our total portfolio, once we close on that, will be 250. And then we have another one under contract that's 167, and that's actually in Augusta, Georgia. So it's just across the river from South Carolina.
Got it. So can you talk about your underwriting criteria and what type of deals are you currently looking for?
So typically B and C class, we're looking for something with a value add component. I think ideal is, I mean, the light value add, we're not looking at, super heavy value adds, but we definitely are looking for a value add component to it. Whether it's something that's been mismanaged, maybe there's a lot of deferred maintenance, maybe there's a little bit of both, so. And then as far as, metros, Carolinas, some metros in Georgia and Alabama are the ones we're specifically looking at. But give you an example, one we closed on earlier in the summer, closed in June, 80 units in upstate South Carolina. Actually, my virtual background is Greenville, and this 80 units about 15 miles away from the picture in the background. But anyway, it's 80 units, and when we got it under contract, 8 units were completely down. Some of them were stripped down to the studs. None of them had appliances. Some of them didn't even have plumbing in it anymore. So, it was clear that we could come in and we could bring those 8 units back up and increase our NOI really quickly. So the rest of the apartment complex was in decent condition. They had renovated about half of the units that were rentable, and our plan was to come in, bring those 8 units up, renovate the other half that hadn't been renovated before. And there was also a series of duplexes on that property that didn't have air conditioning, and it was just a very simple, buy a $500 or $800 window air conditioning unit, and now you can add $50 to $100 per month to the rent. So in this case, it was a quick and easy value add plan. And, we've brought 4 of the 8 units up to where they're habitable now, and we're working on the next 4, and so in just several months, we've been able to, even under COVID, increase the NOI, increase the income substantially.
So when you're looking for those type of multifamily deals, what metrics are you focusing on when underwriting? I mean, are you looking for NOI? You're looking for price per door? Are you looking for cap rate? Like, what are the main things that you're looking for in a deal?
So usually we're actually looking for returns, because we are syndicating, and we have to be able to bring investors in. So our number one criteria is what kind of returns can we get for the investors? I'm of the opinion that the cap rate of the property at close is less important than a lot of people would say, especially for properties that need a value add. So if you look at the formula, NOI divided by cap rate equals value. But if the property is not running properly, if that NOI is depressed, that formula just breaks down, So I think that formula assumes that things are running optimally or close to optimal level, So for example, we do have one in our portfolio that's more of a heavy lift that had a 0 NOI when we purchased it. So if you look at the NOI cap rate formula, that would say the property is worth 0, and no one in the world is going to give away
whatever you're going to negotiate.
Yeah. So yeah, we came in, and you have to use several different valuation methods to get at a price.
Yeah.
So we definitely look at the price per door. We look at the NOI cap rate determination. I think we use that one more for the exit than we do for getting in. But there's a couple other ways to value properties as well that we'll use. But our main determination is, what returns can we get for our investors, and how much are we going to make on it? So that's one of the things that we look at specifically is, obviously the owners are going to have a price in mind that they want to get. They're going to have probably a line in the sand saying nothing under this price.
And it's going to be unrealistic.
Yeah, and a lot of them are. A lot of them will underwrite and will say, we want to be somewhere in the mid-teens on average returns, and our hold periods, we typically want to be in and out in somewhere between 3 and 6 years. So not a super long hold period either, but looking at the intersection of all of these different criteria. Some things, 15% annualized return over 5 years, you can't get at what the owner wants to ask for it. So, so we end up, looking just like anybody else. We're looking at, 30 or 40 or 50 deals for each one that we get under contract. And, once we get them under contract, I think we've done a pretty good job at conservatively underwriting, negotiating prices. And I think one thing that's really helped us is just, my partner, Eric Shirley, is our acquisitions guy. He's on the phone constantly with brokers, so he's first on their mind when something comes down. And the other thing is we've proven our ability to close, so, we've closed on everything that we've had under contract now. There was a property we backed out on a year ago, but we're under contract on that one again. Long story on that one. Don't want to go into it yet, but we'll be able to close on that one. So I think So I guess the original question was, what are we looking for, and how are we underwriting? So we're basically looking for things that make sense for investors. We do factor in a little more vacancy, a little more bad debt up front because of the COVID scenario that we're in. Our rent growths are kind of flat right now when we're using our projections. And if the numbers still pencil with those things boiled in, we'll make an offer and we'll get the property to the finish line.
Got it. Okay. So again, I don't know the specific numbers when it comes to the, overall multifamily sales in South Carolina. And maybe you can give us a rough number if you have a clue on that. But besides, Eric talking with these brokers, because, personally, there's a lot of operators that are kind of complaining and saying that it's very hard for them to find good deals in the market during these current conditions. So do you use any other kind of creative strategies to source deals during these times?
All of our deals so far have been from brokers. We have had some creative issues. Like one of the deals we had under contract was with a master lease. So we came into this one, and Eric arranged this one with the owner. The owner wanted to line up a 1031 exchange, and so just being flexible with our terms and trying to basically figure out what the owners are actually looking for. And in this particular case, the owner was looking for flexibility. He wanted to be able to do a 1031. And, once you close on a property, you have 45 days to name a new property and 180 days total to close. So he didn't want to be under the gun to have to move his funds, that quickly. So knowing that he wanted flexibility, we wrote a contract that was very flexible. We would take over operations of the property. We would pay him, a monthly fee for being able to operate the property. And then after somewhere in the 12 to 24 month mark, we would do the purchase, which would give him plenty of time to find the next property, line everything up, and do all that stress free. So that's how we got one of the properties under contract. And before we were able to actually sign on the dotted line, we were kicking contracts back and forth. The owner actually came to us and said, I actually just found the property that I want to move all my funds into. Do you guys just want to buy it now? And, he discounted the price for us. And so we did. So I think part of it is just, trying to find out the owner's why, and that's not always, brokers aren't always going to tell you that. There's some owners that don't even tell the brokers why, but in that case, I think it was just being flexible and being creative and working with the seller. And that's the other thing. I think it's just the speed, where Eric's very fast at, underwriting, getting, ducks in a row and being able to put an offer in. So I would say those are probably the two biggest things that we're, that's our secret for success.
Got it. Okay. So talking about South Carolina, again, kind of coming back to the market, there's a lot of other great markets, as I mentioned, like Georgia being one of them, and Florida and Texas. And of course, there's a lot of companies are moving to these states, including South Carolina, for tax purposes, from North and from California. And, so can you talk about kind of what is the main employment like in South Carolina? Because Texas, is driven on hospitals and healthcare. So what is the main driver in South Carolina?
So upstate South Carolina, I would say the biggest single company is BMW. Every BMW SUV made in the world is produced in Greer, South Carolina, which is, right between Greenville and Spartanburg. It actually straddles the county line. And so there's a lot of companies that have built up around this BMW manufacturing plant. BMW itself employs, about 15,000 people, but Michelin Tires has a plant right next door because Michelin Tires is putting tires on all the BMWs, and so there's a lot of other industries that are related to the auto industry that have basically parked right next to BMW. Something else that's really good is it's a transportation hub for the Southeast. Spartanburg, South Carolina is known as Hub City, and there's an inland port. So you have the Port of Savannah and the Port of Charleston, which are the two major ports in the southeastern United States. There is substantial rail lines between, Savannah, Charleston, and Spartanburg, South Carolina. So when you look at your shippers, if a truck's coming from the West Coast to the East Coast and back, it'll save them 4 hours transit times two, so 8 hours worth of transit time by loading up at the inland port. So anyway, there's a lot of industry that's in that area, and a lot of people are moving down there. Once again, it's a tax-friendly state for businesses. The cost of living is still low, and like you said, a lot of money is moving on the East Coast. It's north to south, so a lot of money's moving from New England to the Southeast, and that's the biggest driver. Those types of companies are the biggest drivers in upstate South Carolina. In Georgia, the U.S. government has moved a lot of their cyber capability to Augusta. So they're pouring billions with a B, billions of dollars in development that's going to bring tens of thousands of jobs in the cyber community, which were typically very high paying jobs, white collar, people with advanced graduate degrees. And one nice thing is you create one white collar job, it actually brings 1.3, 1.4 total jobs to a neighborhood, because there has to be a certain amount of blue collar jobs to support each white collar job. So anyway, it's just that the growth in these areas, because they are relatively business friendly, they're typically landlord friendly states too. There's just a lot of industries, a lot of business moving down.
Got it. Okay. So as you mentioned before, you're currently right now in DC at this moment while we're still talking. So, and some of your partners are living, different states too. So can you talk about how do you manage the properties? Do you have a kind of vertically integrated property management, or use the third party one?
We still use third party. I think we haven't hit critical mass yet where it makes sense to bring somebody indoors. So 250 units we're still a fairly small company. So we have two different management companies that manage 5 assets for us, and soon to be 6. So there's one management company we really like, and I think all of our new acquisitions from here on out will be under their umbrella. But internally, each one of us has a role in the company. We try to institute some checks and balances in the process. So Todd is generally our asset manager. And I do part of Brian Mallon does part of the finances, and I'm reviewing a lot of the documents. So we've instituted checks and balances, where Todd is the point of contact, but we're kind of backing him up on that one. It's the same thing with Eric and his acquisitions role. He is in charge of that. But there's a couple checks and balances in play, where, when he finds a property, he's sending us the information. We're all looking it over as well. And, we all have to give a thumbs up before, we'll put an offer on the table. So, it's 2 of the 4 of us right now are living in the Carolinas. DC is not that far. I can actually get in my car and, wake up a little bit early, get in my car, and I'll be in Columbia, South Carolina before noon. So, it's managing it is not terribly difficult from where I'm at. But Todd's a lot closer. He lives in South Carolina right now, so he's a couple-hour drive, and on a monthly basis, he's going on a road trip where he's hitting every property up. And for the foreseeable future, there may be a point where we're too big for that to happen, but at that point, we'll have employees, or we'll hire out somebody to be an asset manager who can do that.
Got it. Okay. So talking still about the property management, which I'm sure you have a great company, as you mentioned, you're still going to continue to work with them going further. So that's awesome. So, during the current times, if you're watching this episode, this is what day is it? 23rd of October right now. So still happening with the COVID. So can you talk about how does your property manager go about when the rent collections? Because, for some operators, it's a little bit of a problem current these times.
Yeah, so we haven't had a huge problem with rent collection. Typically, we're talking C-class assets, B and C-class assets. Typically, every month or so, we have one or two people who aren't paying rent. And that goes along with the asset class. The difference now is, with the eviction moratorium, we are holding on to a couple of these people, which is all it is. But we've been able to file for eviction on several people, even with the eviction moratorium going on. And just being able to file on people and serving them notice that we're filing for eviction has actually gotten a lot of people to pay. Whether or not a judge will actually evict them or not, that's debatable. There are still evictions, for cause going on in South Carolina, so there's certain things that judges, CDC, the federal government has put their foot down on certain areas. But there are a lot of reasons where we can still evict people. So anyway, I think, the property manager is trying to work with people. If we can get partial month's rent, we'll get the partial month's rent right now. So knowing that the evictions aren't going to go over, 100% of the time like they would have pre-COVID, they've just adjusted their philosophy. We're still, when we have bad debt, we're still sending them to collections. Just because we can't evict them doesn't mean we can't go through other processes. So, we just sent a couple of people to collections this week. So, now it's not going to be the property manager. It's going to be, collection agency talking to them. We've reported it to the credit agency. So, there are things that there are still tools in your toolbox to try to, get what's owed to you. But at the same time, if somebody comes and they're legitimately having a hard time, we'll do our best to work with them. So we're not cold and heartless, but we still need to run this as a business, and we still need to try to collect rents.
Okay, got it. So talking about making investments in multifamily again, because there's plenty more investment vehicles, different vehicles, but let's talk specific commercial, real estate. So what will make multifamily different, let's say, from storage, retail, office, or industrial real estate?
So I think the key is that multifamily provides a basic human need. There are a couple things we all need. We all need food, we all need clothing, we all need shelter. And multifamily will provide shelter. I think we've seen in my lifetime at least, there have been lots of ups and downs in the other property types. Office is taking a huge hit right now because of the coronavirus. There's a lot of office space that's unrented because we're in a downturn, number one, and number two, so many people are teleworking that a lot of office spaces are just unleashed right now. You can say the same thing about retail. Retail has gone, up and down over the last couple of years. Every decade or so, there's a disruptor. Walmart disrupted Main Street, and so retail on Main Street took a nosedive, and then several years later, Amazon disrupted Walmart, the Walmart model. So, and then there's a lot of areas where these big box stores are closing up. One of them just down the street from us closed its doors, not too long ago, and it's because Amazon is delivering to everybody's door. So I think retail, has a lot of ups and downs. You can say the same thing about any other asset class. There's a fair amount of ups and downs, but when you come back to multifamily, there is a basic human need to have shelter, and multifamily provides that. Now, we might not have in the multifamily property type, you might not have as good a years as industrial's having, right now, but you don't have as many downs. It's a little bit more resilient. yeah, your returns are still solid. You're still getting double-digit returns even in a recession. Whereas in the other property types, if you're in the wrong retail space right now, you may be going bust.
Mhm. Yeah, okay. So talking about commercial real estate, let's say, by the deals, because I want to come back to the point which you mentioned that you had when you bought a property, there was, I'm sure maybe I get the number wrong.
Mhm,
I think you said 8 units, the kind of vacant, and there was zero
mhm.
appliances, and you kind of did a heavy value add for these,
Yep.
units. So are you planning to do anything with the redevelopment? Let's say taking some office space or hotels and redeveloping into multifamily?
That's not something that we have thought about doing yet. I mean, if it makes sense, we might jump into that. But right now our bread and butter is buy a cash flowing asset. Something that's you know inefficient and bringing it up to a higher level of efficiency. Um, I think we would have to do a lot of research or partner with people who've done it before to be able to get into that. Um, in one of the areas, the first apartment building that we purchased is downtown Spartanburg, and there's a lot of that happening in downtown Spartanburg. Um, it has a little different risk profile, and it's something that we are not quite as familiar with. So, for the time being, that's not on our radar.
Mhm. Okay, got it. So talking about the multifamily deals, can you talk about the ways that they're structured for the investors
Mhm.
to invest with you and maybe mention a few benefits? Why is it beneficial for them to invest?
So we play with each deal is a little bit different. We like to hit about 8% cash on cash, over the hold time. And we like to hit about 15 to 16% total yield on money. So some properties are a little stronger on cash flow, and some properties are a little stronger on the potential to build equity in the property. So depending on each property, we will structure it a little differently. But end of the day, I think our structure is going to look something like 75-25% split. Where the investors are getting 75% of all the incomes coming off the property. Um, we have done preferred rates of return before. So a preferred rate of return is basically the first X% coming off the property goes to the investors. And then once you reach that hurdle, you go into an equity split. And we've also done a couple with what's called a waterfall, which is just another type of hurdle where maybe the split is 80-20 until we get to a 12 or a 15% mark. And then once we hit that hurdle, once we paid our investors, 15%, now the needle moves to where it's a little more advantageous to us as a general partnership. So, in general, there's going to be, some sort of, proceed split between the LP and the GP. 75 to 80% is typically where we're sitting on that one. Um, and then depending on the deal, there may be a hurdle built in either as a pref or as a waterfall on the back end.
Mhm. Okay, got it. So you mentioned about a couple of deals that you're looking to close on. So
Mhm.
that's going to happen in the near future. So what else
Yep.
do you guys currently have in the pipeline? How many more deals are you planning to close on, if you're planning to close on this year?
This year, so we have a separate program. I talked about that one that fell out of contract. Um, we also it's called our concierge service. So we have a couple of higher net worth investors that have invested with us in the past that have approached us and said, I like investing with you. I like multifamily. I just want something that's all mine. So the 40 unit that we fell out of contract on last year, we actually got that wrapped up under contract, and it's part of our concierge service. So I think for stuff that we are pursuing for ourselves, we're trying to do 4 per year. That was our goal going into this year. COVID had a vote and kind of slowed that down, but with the concierge service, we've got one under contract right now that we should close in November, and obviously the Clemson deal that I probably didn't mention it by name, but the 82 unit next to Clemson is going to close next week. We're fully funded on that one, and then The other deal we have under contract will probably close, sometime in January. But ideally, I think we're doing 4 per year plus, a couple one-offs with a concierge service. And then in addition to that, we're also working on an education program for, people to learn how to do the business. I think a fair amount of people who've invested with us have told us that they really want to learn the business as well. They want to passively invest to start earning returns, obviously, but they've told us they want to be able to learn through investing. And we like to listen to what's what we're hearing, and so many people are coming to us saying, I want to invest, but I also want to learn. So we're coming up with an educational program as well. So that'll be released in 3 phases in 2021. But those are the irons we have in the fire right now.
Nice. Okay. So I'm sure I'm going to get the number wrong, so please correct me if you can. The 278?
250 once we close next week.
No. I'm talking about your own personal number that we talk about.
Oh, yes. Okay, that number. 285.
285. Here you go.
Days till retirement.
Yes,
Yep.
yes, exactly. So once you're gonna get full-time involved with real estate, then again, I will follow up with a question. You will have more time to dedicate to the business and to expansion and finding more deals and running the operations and dedicating more time again for the educational platform to teach people about real estate investing and the benefits of it. But what is the overall reason for you, kind of a legacy that you want to leave behind you?
A couple of years ago, I realized that I've missed more of my children's birthday than I've made. So that really has been something that's driven this. I realized a couple of years ago that if I didn't start working towards an exit plan from the Marine Corps, that my option to keep my family fed would be to stay in the Marine Corps longer, and that means, deployments, that means missing more birthdays, missing more holidays and whatnot. So, really right now, the, step one is I want to have time freedom. I don't want to have an employer who can tell me, hey, you're going to go to Iraq and you're leaving in 3 weeks. That's a conversation I've had before. And, it's not fun to put your family on hold because of that. So phase one was just, I need to exit the Marine Corps so I can focus on my family more. And, that's why I keep the countdown. 285 days is how much longer I have until that becomes a reality. And then, phase two is going to be the financial freedom, so to the point to where I can work if I want to. And then after that, the legacy comes in.
Here you go. That's beautiful. So, okay, guys and girls, why did I say guys? I don't know, but make sure that you pass this episode along to the friend of yours. Best case scenario for the person who's looking for ways to learn about real estate investing. That's either active, passive, probably passive in the best case scenario as well. And that person is going to find a lot of great tips, strategies, techniques. There's some motivation involved also for that people to get started investing. But you can connect, and you should connect with Brian again in LinkedIn or Facebook. Those links are going to be down below. Make sure to go and check the Diary of Apartment Investor podcast too. So yeah, there's a lot of great valuable content on all these different platforms and Instagram, of course. Can't forget that too. So, but Brian, I want to say a big thank you again for being on the show today. I learned a lot personally myself from you, from the background, from the journey, the way you conduct the business, and the way you're looking to add value to these properties and the people who are going to be investing alongside with you. So it's awesome. I appreciate it.
Yep. Hey, I appreciate you for having me on. This has been fun.
Thank you. So guys, make sure again, pass this episode along. Brian, thank you again for being on this episode. And as always, I'll see you next time.